Hi, welcome to Home Farm. Today I'm in the garage and I'm going to be undertaking a small DIY project. While I do that, I'm going to test out and review this 300mm metal hacksaw from Presch. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be cutting a piece of sheet metal to size. What I've done is I purchased a standard piece of sheet metal. This is 1 meter by 50 centimeters wide. It was quite cheap to buy it as a pre-made piece. Actually getting something that was custom cut to size was turning out to be quite expensive. So what I've done is I've invested in a good quality metal hacksaw, which we're going to be putting to the test, and we're going to basically be trimming this piece of sheet metal down to size. My initial temptation was to use our miter saw to cut this piece of sheet metal down to size, but when I actually did the measurements, I realized that I was only going to be able to get a portion cut from each side. We have got a metal blade, basically a multi-purpose blade, but I just figured it'd probably be a lot neater, even though it is a little bit more work, to actually utilize a hacksaw. So we went onto Amazon. I had a look at this hacksaws that they had available. This is the one that seemed to be the best fit for us. It seemed like a good quality saw. It had some good reviews, so we purchased it. I've just taken it out of the actual packaging now. I've got to say the actual handle feels really comfortable. It feels very sturdy and very well made. And when I said that this is a 300mm hacksaw, I meant that the actual blade itself is 300mm. And I think from end to end, this saw is about 400mm. As with most saws, when you buy a new one, the actual blade is inverted. So what we're going to do now is we're going to quickly flip that around. If you've purchased one of these saws and you're just curious as to how to flip the blade, or if you want to potentially replace it, when you go to the actual handle, there's a little bit here. You basically just turn that. And what happens is that as you turn that, it actually releases the frame and it loosens the blade just a little bit more. And it simply pops out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invert it, put the blade back onto the little box here, and then you just take the handle and you just screw it tight, and one more turn, and there we go. That is our new blade, nice and fitted, nice and snug. I've measured and drawn the line on the sheet metal itself. I've clamped it into place. Let's get cutting. The obvious issue that you run into is that when you get to a certain point, the actual frame starts to clip the actual metal. So what I've started to do just to speed this process up is I've just taken the miter saw and I'm just cutting into these sections here, so I can just keep cutting with this saw, so I'm getting a nice straight line. It's actually pretty smooth, so I'm very happy with that. So I'm just going to keep going, just cutting as we go along. Arguably not the best a tool for this particular job in terms of the application, because as I said, the actual frame of the saw kept clipping against the actual sheet metal itself, so that's something that probably I didn't think through as much as I should have, but it was quite easy to get around by just cutting little tiny pieces as you went along, which just increased the workload, but it did save us quite a bit of money in the long term, because like I said, between the pre-cut piece of sheet metal that we got with the actual saw was still cheaper than getting a custom sized piece of sheet metal. So now that we've done that, we can see the actual edges. I'm quite pleased with that, because obviously it is a hacksaw, so you are going to have a bit of a rough edge anyway. The way that this is going to happen is the piece that we've got now is basically going to be hidden. You'll never actually see it, so the fact that it's a bit rough is neither here or there, because the clean edges are going to be what's going to be visible. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get some other pieces of metal so we can actually see how this cuts through those. That's cut it quite nicely, a nice smooth edge. It's a little bit coarse and jagged underneath, obviously because of the hacksaw, so you can just take a file and file it down. Very nice and smooth. Next up, we're going to cut through this very thick steel rod. So we've used the saw today to cut through some sheet metal. When you've got long pieces of metal, like I said earlier, the actual saw does clip, so that's something you probably want to avoid if you've got anything longer than about 25 to 30 centimeters, because then the actual frame of the actual saw is going to catch the sheet, and then you've got to do what I did in terms of just keep having to cut little pieces out, which just takes a lot of time. It's not impossible, I certainly got through it. You also need to hold the saw a lot more upright so that the actual frame doesn't clip against the edge. It's just one of those things. It's not the perfect saw for this job, but it's one that I was able to use and actually cut my sheet metal to size that I wanted to. When you've got thinner pieces of sheet metal like this was 0.9 mil, so just under a millimeter, very thin, very easy to cut through, to be honest. I mean, it is a brand new blade, so you'd expect that. Unlike wood saws, obviously, where the blades are a lot sharper, this is a little bit duller, but it gets through metal like this quite easily. I was also able to cut through this steel rod. The rod was a centimeter wide. It took a fair amount of effort, but it managed to get through. It was actually quite a clean cut in the end too. So again, the saw managed to do that. I think the ideal application for stuff like this is going to be rods. It's going to be pipes. If you've got metal pipes and stuff to cut through, it's going to be super easy to work through those. And like I said, smaller pieces of sheet metal. I think the saw actually is ideal for those kind of jobs. In terms of the saw itself, it is very ergonomic. It is very well designed. It feels very comfortable in the hand. I sawed for quite a long period of time, so that was actually quite a big job in the end getting through that sheet metal. But at no point in time did my hand feel tired from actually holding and sawing with the actual saw itself. I like the fact that they've got a really good design for changing the blade with this little mechanism at the back. That works very, very well too. Prior to this, we didn't have a metal saw, so this is going to make a very good addition to our saw collection. Definitely going to be super handy if we do have to cut through any metal. Up until this point, I've avoided those kind of jobs and those kind of projects. But now that we've got this, I'll definitely be able to put it to use in the future. So I hope that you have found this video useful and interesting. If you did, please give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and we'll see you in our next video. Thanks for watching.